como espero que sepan, el doctor Jenkins es gran escritor de cortos, cómics, videojuegos, escribió el Dark Knight de Batman y cómics como The Darkness 2, Hulk, entre otros. Entonces, thank you for coming. We hope it's a great experience for everyone. Bueno, los dejo.
Thank you. I'm very, very, very happy to be here, and what I hope is that over the next couple of hours we can talk about games and how they're made and some of the concepts. But more than anything, I want you to have some fun. I want you to enjoy what you hear, and I want you to learn as much as you can. So I'm going to destroy that already because I'm going to tell you like who I am and where I came from. So bear with me for 10 minutes. I first came to the United States a number of years ago, and I was trying to be a musician, but I met a couple of guys who had done a black and white comic book, and that comic book happened to be the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And this was back in the day. This was when they had just sold the rights to make a TV show. So I was the second person that went to go work with them, and the next thing, as you probably know, you're probably not old enough, but some of you may be, it took off, and everything went crazy, and suddenly I was 20 years old, living in an environment where there were just millions and millions and millions of dollars. But what was so great was that we owned it, and we controlled the franchise, which was something that had not happened since Star Wars. So really, the creators don't very often get to own their material, but George Lucas did with Star Wars, and we did with the Ninja Turtles. And of course, now that the big companies know that it can happen, they close that door forever, so, never again. And the great thing was, because I was so young, I didn't know what I could not do. So I was not afraid of anything. And it taught me at a very young age in my business profession that I should be bold and I should be audacious. I should believe in the things that I do. After all, my two friends, Terry Eastman and Peter Laird, believed in their idea, and look what happened. So nobody can tell me these days that you cannot do something, because my answer would be, thanks for the inspiration, now I'm going to go do it. And very briefly, I went through my time with the Ninja Turtles. I became a freelance writer because I was not so fond of being an editor or doing licensing. And one of the first jobs I did for Marvel Comics as a freelance writer was a book called The Inhumans. And Inhumans, at the time, Marvel were in bankruptcy, and the Inhumans were just throwaway characters. We happened to win an Eisner Award with the Inhumans. And as I understand it, I think it was the first Eisner for Marvel in maybe 12 or 13 years. So at the beginning, they said, well, the Inhumans, who cares? Now it was, Paul, you're pretty clever, let's give you Spider-Man, whatever you want to do. We did Spider-Man, we did the origin of Wolverine, which some of you guys may be aware of. And the thing was that Wolverine had no origin for 35 years. They allowed me to tell an origin story that was very dangerous and worrying for them, but they trusted me, and it was all about believing in myself. People would say to me, you must be very scared, to which my answer is, it's a comic book, I'm not scared. So that kind of gives you a little bit of my background, but let me kind of tell you how it was that I came to first write on video games, and then how I came to kind of innovate on video games and actually begin to create games in a new way. It's a crazy story. So my mum is a little old lady, and she lives in Wales, or at the time she lived in the center of Wales. And she had called me up and said, Paul, you never guess who lived around the corner from me? Terry Jones, and he's one of the guys from Monty Python. Right? I hope you guys know Monty Python. We might be too young. So I said, oh, well, that's really interesting. And I happened to be in Los Angeles with Kevin Eastman, who's one of the creators of the Ninja Turtles. This is 1992 or 93, I think. And it was the time of the Northridge earthquakes. So the whole town was wobbling. And I arrived on the plane. I'd actually come from Britain to the East Coast and then directly to LA. So I was really tired, and Kevin invited me to the Playboy Mansion. And I think I'm one of the only guys in the world that said no thanks. So I did not go, and in the morning I saw him, and this is the scene, if you can imagine. I'm sitting at breakfast, eating some eggs. Right here is Roger Moore, who played James Bond, eating his eggs. Right there is Bruce Springsteen, and I'm just, what's happening to me? And as this happened, in comes Kevin Eastman, and he said, Paul, you never guess who I just met last night at the Playboy Mansion? Terry Jones from Monty Python. I said, oh, that's interesting. A minute later, in comes Terry Jones. Hello, Kevin. Kevin introduces me and speaks to him and says, Terry, this is my friend Paul Jenkins. And I said, hello, Terry, you know my mum. And he said, what? He said, yeah, you know Hazel from the pub. And he said, you're Hazel's boy? So he knew my mum, right? Well, it turns out that Terry had come into the States to create a video game for Crystal Dynamics. And it was a very early PlayStation game. It was called Blazing Dragons. And Terry told me the secret story of it. Basically, he arrived on the plane, and his agent had met him and said, so Terry, did you bring the new video game concept? And Terry had not thought of anything. He didn't even know he was supposed to. So he did what I would do. He said, yeah, absolutely. And then in the limo on the way to the video game place, he actually created an idea. And it was called Blazing Dragons. So that was that. He created this idea, everything went away. A couple of weeks later, I was contacted by Crystal Dynamics, and they said, Paul, we're interested in having you come work for us. We recognize your work in comics. Would you like to come and work with us on Blazing Dragons? And I said, I don't know. And they said, well, you know, it may interest you to know that it was created by Terry Jones. And I said, I know Terry. He knows my mom. They said, really? So I ended up getting the job in some part because I think they just thought it was funny that my mum would drink beer with Terry Jones. The funny thing is that when it came time to do the audio recording, they called me and they said, I wonder if you could ask your mum a favor. And I said, okay. They said, could you ask her to ask Terry Jones to do the voices? I called up my mum and I said, hey mum, can you ask Terry Jones if you can do the audio recording when you see him at the pub? And she said, no problem. And apparently that's how Terry heard of it, and he ended up doing some of the voices because of my little mum. So that was my, by the way, if any of you share that experience, you know, that's how to break into video games, right? So that was an exposure. But really what I'm going to talk about is like why and what's interesting about games. At the time, I just considered video games to be things that I saw. I didn't really play very many of them. I thought they were interesting, but I didn't live and die with video games. And I worked on a couple more. I worked on, just some small games. A few years later, I was contacted by a good friend of mine, a guy called David Jaffe, who's the guy who created Twisted Metal for Sony. And Dave had done the first game and perhaps the second, and then this third and the fourth had come out, and they really did not work out so well. So they asked him to come back, and he was going to do this brand new game called Twisted Metal Black, and it was completely crazy. It was really evil and insane, and so he said, Paul, I thought of you. And he was a big Spider-Man fan. So I came and I worked on Twisted Metal, and then I worked with him on the original materials for God of War. For Sony, I wrote some of the materials that they used, and then I kind of went my own way, and they went on to develop the game. And a few years later, I began to realize that games were interesting to me. I've always been a fan of the poor child of literature, and the truth is that I've written many comics, but I'm not really a comic book writer. I'm not a fan. I like comic books, okay, but I only really like the good ones. And I find that so many of them don't really appeal to me. I'm not saying they're bad, by the way, I never would. I'm saying that they're not really my favorite way to be entertained. But I do feel a sense of kinship, of friendship with the comics creation community, because everyone looks down on comics and, comics, who cares? Who cares? The truth is, as I once lectured here, that comics are quite possibly one of the oldest forms of human artistic expression. Because if you think about it, paintings in caves that show men with spears and then a bull with a spear in it, that's a sequence. It's a sequential story. That's a comic. So now we're going to write some video games. And I decided I was going to be the champion of games, that games are a valid form of art. But what I could see was perhaps in part the game industry did not believe that they were valid. It's almost as if I believe they're a form of art, maybe even the audience believes they're a form of art, but the game industry does not believe this, and I thought this was a shame. So I decided I would grab my sword and my trusted steed and I would protect video games and try to build them and make them better. And the first opportunity that I really had to do this was with a game called The Incredible Hulk Ultimate Destruction. And it was very much a turning point for me as a creator, because I realized that I wasn't just working in the game industry, that I had something to bring to the game industry. And that was, in a sense, validation of their product and a belief in story. And much of what I'm going to talk about with you guys today is story and games and how they really have changed and what we are becoming. Just to tell in a nutshell the version of the Hulk story, I came to work on the game, and the developers said to me that they made the first Incredible Hulk game, but it didn't do very well. It was very unsuccessful. And they asked me if I would help them understand what had gone wrong with the first Hulk game. And I could tell them that what was really wrong with the game was that if you played the Hulk, wouldn't most of you want to just smash stuff up? Wouldn't you say, I'm the Hulk, great, now I get to break things? But the game itself guided you down tunnels. And so you'd come around the corner of a tunnel and you'd run into people that were shooting at you. That does not make you feel strong. It makes you feel like a victim. And I could see this from my background as a storyteller and as a writer, that what they had broken was the core mythology of Hulk. Hulk is smash stuff up. Hulk is crazy, mindless fun. And yet here we were worried about whether or not something would be around the corner. That doesn't make you feel like the Hulk. And at that moment, I realized that storytelling in video games is not the same as storytelling in anything else. Let me give you an example. When you see a movie, and it's an action buddy cop flick, and it says Brad Pitt is this cop, that's the ad for it. Now, if you translate that to a video game, it doesn't say Brad Pitt is the cop. It says you are the cop. And what I began to realize was that the story in a game is told by a collaborative force of the people that make the game and the people that play the game. When you play the game, you're the audience, you are the director, you're an actor, you're everything. And so it's a collaborative story. But if you believe that, that's when we can make really, really great games. And I feel that in the 10 years or so since I was on that Hulk game, that's what the industry has begun to do. So what I pitched to the guys early on was that if you want to be the Hulk, you have to be a player that can stand and do nothing. In a sense, if you can stand on top of a building and just hang out, and the moment that you jump off the building, you're the person that starts the fight. And because you start the fight, you're the Hulk. You feel good. When you smash stuff up, it's not because you're reacting to somebody trying to hurt you. It's because you jumped off the building where you said, I want to go and be the Hulk. And that was a big, big difference. But the core mythology had changed back to the whole thing that we expect the Hulk to be. Now, understand that the way then to do that was to take away going down tunnels and instead turn it into a sandbox environment, which is what the developer had wanted to do anyway. You know, they wanted to go in the sandbox environment. So I learned at that point that now we were going to be able to find ways to put story into games. My great friend, who was the game's lead designer, Eric Holmes, at that point said to me, Jenkins, you have a talent. You can actually design games. You can design gameplay. And so my latest and my most important part of my life in designing games was that I wanted to basically provide a mix of storytelling and gameplay. For just 1 second, this is what I'd like you to do. I'd like you to think about the concept that we take as writers. As writers, we say, story is everything. And what that really means to us is that we must commit to telling the story from the beginning to the end. You don't compromise telling the story. The story is everything. And I learned to turn it around in video games to say everything is story. Because the truth is that when you press a button, you're telling the story. When you play Angry Birds, believe it or not, you're telling the story. We had this a little bit earlier in my workshop. How are you telling the story with Angry Birds? I mean, after all, what are you doing? You're pressing a button and woo, right? Nothing. But the truth is that at its very core, you are initiating the attack. You are going in a way to rescue the princess. You're going to rescue the eggs, but it's the same story. There are some things that the little birds are doing that are an extension of you, the player. If you enter a screen where you have to press start, and you initiate the story by pressing the word start, or let's begin the game, you are telling your own story. Now, I told you, my friend Dave Jaffe at Sony, who was at Sony for a long time, just finished another version of Twisted Metal. He and I have this great debate, because Dave believes, and I think it's a valid point, I don't agree with him. Dave believes that there is no story in video games. That in fact, stories cannot be told with video games. Because you cannot guarantee that the story is presented to the audience. Listen, the first thing that we do when we make a game is we put up a guiding principle. And what we're saying is we want the players or the audience to make choices, right? I want to give you the choice. Do you want to turn left? Then turn left. You want to turn right? Then turn right. In a movie, Brad Pitt's driving along and the director says, okay, you're going right. That's the next part of our story. And in a game, we come to a fork in the road, and I say, okay, you can turn right or you can turn left. And your story is going to change. Hey, your story is already different. You know why? Because if you play the Hulk, you are going to be the scared Hulk. You don't really want to go into combat very quickly. You creep around corners. You are going to be angry Hulk. You don't like the fact that this is going, you're going to smash everything up. You are going to be scary Hulk or crazy Hulk. You're going to play different. You're going to be brave Hulk. Everybody's playing the character differently. So the story experience is changing for every single human being. Hey, I think that's somewhat true of movies or novels anyway. We were explaining earlier on in my workshop, you guys must all be familiar with The Hobbit. And in particular, when I was a child, I grew up thinking about the scene where Bilbo Baggins goes into the cave and he finds the ring, and Gollum is in there. And he gets the ring and he runs away with it, and he has a little sword, and the sword lights up, and there's an orc, and he runs out and gets away. And I see that in my mind, right? That's my story. But you guys, if you're familiar with that story, your cave looks different. It has the same elements, but it looks different. Your cave, Gollum looks different. And I see a raised piece of rock and then the pool of water, but you may see a waterfall or something. Everybody's experience in a story is different anyway. It's just that it's so much more extreme in a video game. So what I realized at that time was that games had the potential to tell amazing, amazing stories. And then I looked around at games and I began to realize that some of the developers and publishers were trying to do it, and many, many more were not. It's okay. You don't have to make a work of literature in everything that you make. Not every movie is intended to win an Oscar. You have Crash and you have Michael Bay, and it depends who you are. Do you want to go see Transformers 3? I don't know why, but I don't mean that against Michael Bay. I mean, it's not me. I can't do that. I don't have anything. It has nothing for me. So I began to look at other games and see who was doing what and how were we being taught that these are stories. Here's my theory. If you think of the movie industry right now, they have these great big award ceremonies, the Oscars, or any one of the film festivals where they go and they pat themselves on the back and say, look, we're really clever. And at the Oscars, they recognise the most amazing stories and the genius directors and the people who wrote the best screenplays. And those of us who are around it recognise other people in this area too. I mean, sound and sound design is a big thing for me because I believe sound just builds so much. And so they recognise the best sound designer, right? And video games are like, everybody laughs at video games. They're nothing. They can't be a form of art. They're Angry Birds. They are, you know, Grand Theft. They're Halo. Why is that a form of art? Truth is, it's a wonderful form of art. Back in the day, when movies were first created and they became black and white projected movies, they were unable to match sound with the movies. And so they were silent movies. They were in black and white, and they pulled a bunch of old circus performers and vaudeville and comedians, and they said, do pantomime. So the first movie, hey, how's it going? Nothing's happening. But they were beginning to understand how things work on camera. You move forward to the times of, say, Stan Laurel and Oliver Hardy. Laurel and Hardy learned something. They innovated. They understood that the camera catches their face. So every so often they look to camera, or they make a little sly wink, or they would use their facial expressions to begin to tell a story. Now, in comes the advent of sound. Sound changes everything. Sound changes everything. Suddenly, you have the most, and let's face it too, you have works of art that certain people have made in the silent era too. Metropolis would be a perfect example, okay? Beautiful piece of work that has a very, very difficult theme. So now with sound comes this amazing time in film where they are making film after film after film. A load of really bad ones, okay? Ronald Reagan westerns with a monkey, okay? That's okay. You know, people were entertained, right? And they make brilliant films. Citizen Kane, the Third Man, you know, like these beautiful, beautiful movies, right? And suddenly, they are a form of art. I submit they were a form of art the first time they came into being. They were not a sophisticated form of art, but they were a form of art. I believe that video games, with all of my heart, I believe that video games are arrived at that point. That we are at the point now where movies were, when they went from silent films to the talking films. That we've now arrived at a place where our sophistication can bring the audience into playing and living and telling a story. But you'd be surprised at some of the examples that I can bring up that will show you how stories are being told in video games. Let's go to some of the people that are now innovating in story. Presumably, many of you are familiar with the series Assassin's Creed. Now, if I had told you 10 years ago that a very popular franchise would be set in 14th and 15th century Florence and Turkey, the game industry itself would, not you, but the game industry would have said, no way, we're not making that game, it's not going to happen. Now you can project forward to the creation of a game like Assassin's Creed that's gone through 1, 2, 3, 4 iterations, and it's getting better and better and better. With strong lead characters, with beautiful music, with amazing production values. This is a very, very legitimate work of art. And we're just getting better and better. So who are the forerunners? Maybe some of the Japanese games that really brought to us a sense of storytelling. I said earlier on, you know, I am not a fan of Metal Gear Solid, and you'll find out why. But I respect it in terms of what it brought to the art form of video games. And we're now looking at some other things. What about Angry Birds? Is that a form of art? What about casual games? Are these part of the art form? Console games are not really doing so great right now, but look at the advent of Farmville and the Mafia Wars on Facebook. What's interesting is your grandmother's playing Farmville. Maybe you are too. What's interesting is that the legitimate acceptance of video games has become the norm. It used to be the exception. You only have to look back 10 years to see that grandma would say, no way, no one. You're not playing those video games, they'll rot your brain. Now you can say, hey, Grandma, you've been on the computer for 12 hours, get off. Someone go check Grandma, I don't think she's breathing. So, I mean, it's changing, right? The whole environment, the whole acceptance. Well, what happened in cinematic convention was that people began to accept cinema. Back in the early days, when you used specific camera movements, the audience was not sophisticated enough to understand. If you had a full shot of New York City and central to the shot is the Empire State Building, then you cut in to show just the building, and then you cut into a window. In the early days, the audience would have said, I don't know where I'm standing in space. What happened? I don't understand. But if I showed you that now, you've watched so many movies, you've been so exposed to these methods of storytelling that you accept it as the norm. What's happening with you guys now, all of your lives, you've seen video games. Now, this is going to date me. I'm in my 40s now, so I'm getting up there. But I do remember the arcades and the Poms and the Space Invaders and these primitive early ones that were just whiling away the time. And I've seen the development of story, and there have been these times in video games where just story has changed and story has changed. So that now we're at the advent of a new age of storytelling. Don't forget, we're about to go into some new generation consoles. What the next generation of Xbox and 360 and PC especially, and iPads and tablets and even phones can do far outstrips what we can do right now. The new computer chips are so much smaller and tinier and more compact and more powerful than they ever were. You only have to look at the last 10 years of zip drives and disk drives to see it. Because 15 years ago, the idea that you could have 1 gigabyte was impossible. Now, the idea that you can have a terabyte is normal. That's what we're doing with our technology, and our technology is changing almost faster than our ability to create new things to use that technology. The rendering is going to be different. The photorealism is going to be different. We're going to be making a different product, and it's going to change from year to year to year to year. We're making better and better and better ideas. So if I look at the way that games have come, I can look at some of the forerunners, some of the most brilliant games that have come out, and I can point you in their direction. I brought up a couple of these earlier on, but I'd like to kind of point you to them and say, if you've never played them, do yourself a favor, go find them, because they're worth seeing so that you can understand how we've evolved. The first one I point you to is a little game called Ibero. Some of you will know it, many of you will not. Apparently, I'm really surprised that so many people don't. But Ibero was developed, and it's basically a simple little character. He's a little boy, and he has Viking horns on his head. And he goes up to a castle in the sky to save a princess. And he never really speaks in English. And I pantomimed this already, but we'll try it again. Instead of speaking, because it's an American developed game, he doesn't say, hey, come over here. He says, eh. And then they go over and go, no. They never actually speak in language. It's great. It's worldwide. Read English, read Spanish, read German, doesn't matter. Now you've got this whole form of storytelling that's so beautifully universal. Because we can all be the little boy, we can all push the blocks, we can all feel, and what was so great about it was that the wind would rush. And as the wind rushed past your head and you heard the sound of the bad guys coming, you just felt as though you were living in this atmosphere and living in this moment. Let me go to the next one. Another great example that taught me how games could recreate things for us was of all crazy things, NCAA American football. Okay, completely different example, but let me tell you one. NCAA football, and some of you will be familiar with the concept of the NFL and how football TV works. On TV, you watch a game, the guy makes a play, catches the ball, gets tackled, and the commentator says, look, he caught a 23-yard pass, and he was tackled by the cornerback, and now it's first down and 10 yards to go. And so, we watch this on TV. The people that made NCAA football realized that they didn't need for the players to play the game. They didn't need you to be the quarterback or the running back or the receiver. You can do some of that because we want to, but the rest of it was recreating the television experience that we're all familiar with. So once the play was over, instead of you standing up and going back to the huddle, instead, it would bring the TV screen and it would say, hey, this is the next choice you can make for your play. Meantime, the commentators are saying, that was a really good play by the wide receiver. He went for 23 yards, and that was, so they just kind of made it up as they went along, but it felt like the television experience. And the moment I saw that game, I thought, this is how we're going to do it. We're not just giving you, the ability to play James Bond. We're giving you the ability to do the things that you want to do. If you want to watch football on TV, American football on TV, you get to be part of it in this game. You don't want to be the running back. You want to be the person watching television, which is what you normally do. You can relate to that. Another great game. If you guys have never seen Fatal Frame, then find Fatal Frame. What's so great about it is it's one of the first ghost stories that I ever saw as a video game that made you nervous. After all, what's the point? Well, this is going to get to the point of what I want to talk to you about, which is emotional engineering. What am I trying to do? I don't want to just tell you a story that you don't care about. You're part of the story. So if you're going to play a ghost story, I want you to be scared. I want you to feel, don't go in there. You know the difference between a movie when the heroine walks up the thing and you think, she's about to walk into a room full of zombies, and as she puts her hand on the door, you say, don't go in there. Well, in a game, it's completely different. It's you. And you've got to put your hand on the door and go in there, and you know it. It's a story, it's just not the same story. So what Fatal Frame did was it gave you a camera, and you can use the camera to find ghosts. And if you turn around like this, it starts flashing, now a heartbeat. Boom, 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 boom. And you turn, and suddenly there's a ghost in front of you. Or my favorite, you turn, boom, 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 and you can't see it, and suddenly you look up, and it's a person hanging. And you snap the picture, and as you snap the picture, you capture the ghost, and the ghost disappears. And on the screen, for just 2 or 3 seconds, is the photo that you captured. You couldn't see it with your eyes, but you could see it with the camera. And now you see a person hanging that almost got you as a ghost that almost caught you. And that's the very essence of ghost storytelling to me. Oh no, I've almost run into, I saw something I didn't want to see. It almost caught me. Don't go in there. All these are thoughts that we have in our mind. But these people actually gave you the opportunity to play this game. Now, let me tell you, Fatal Frame is by no means perfect, but it is pretty good. They open the doors just a little bit too slowly. So as the doors open too slowly, you're saying, oh, there's nothing bad behind this door. Half the time, there's nothing bad behind the door. But you always think, well, if you're always nervous and they keep you on edge, they're doing their job, they're making you a part of the story. The last specific game I just want to cite, because obviously there are millions of games that we can talk about, is a game called Psychonauts by Tim Schafer. Has anybody actually played Psychonauts? I'd love to see if a few of you have found it. Okay. Psychonauts is a beautiful, wonderful idea. The idea is that you play a little kid who has like psychic abilities, and he has the ability to go inside the brains of people who are mentally ill. And he can, by bouncing around and doing his thing and helping solve problems and actually playing a game, you can go in and you can help people get over their fear of spaces or, their schizophrenia. And it's a great concept. It may not be an easy concept, but neither is Assassin's Creed. Assassin's Creed is playing an assassin in the 14th century, It's not easy. But it's definitely worthwhile, and I submit it contributes to the form of art that we've now created. Here's another thing that's going to happen to you. Again, an example that I cited from my workshop earlier. Something's going to happen to you now that's never happened to any group of people in history. It's one of those, you close your eyes and just bear with me for a second. Just imagine that when you were a kid, you went to the beach. And it was this really nice place that your parents took you. And you went there quite often. And you can see in your mind, you remember the surf. And you remember the beach. And you remember the sand. And And there was a bridge nearby, and this place was just beautiful. It was just this really cool place. And then there was this one time where you were there with your mom and dad, and your mom got picked up by a dragon, and she got taken away, and then you chased after her, and your dad was killed back here, but you had these golden arrows, and you could fly. Hey, the first part of that story is a memory. But the truth is that some of you guys will have been in these environments now for so long. If you played a level of a video game for 9 hours, where you've been in and out of this place, you've lived in this environment for so long that it now almost becomes a memory. It's almost as if games are becoming part of our collective memory. We remember the home base that we had in Mafia 2, because it was kind of cool. And we went there so often, we drove through it so often, and we went around the corner in New York, in Chicago, and we did these mobster deeds, and we did all this crazy stuff, but the truth is, you went in and out of that home base so often that it's almost become a memory of your life. You think back on it, and I bet each of you that are interested in video games can probably think of one environment that you've been in, that you think, I feel really good about that place. That was my crib. I spent all my money, and I put paintings up on the wall or some crazy stuff that you spend my money on. These are very, very real places to us now. And we're at a point in history where games are becoming partly our reality. I mean, it may sound crazy, but the concept of being and living inside a game, we're about to go to new places. We're going to go to virtual reality. We're going to have games on our glasses. We're going to have the audio feed. We're going to touch things. We're going to be able to move our hand and put it into a light source. And as we move our hand, we'll be able to manipulate things with magic. We can almost start to do magic. And in the life that you live, when you're in your 40s and then subsequently your 50s, and you watch people who are then in their 20s doing this constantly, talking on the phone to the lapel of their jacket, things change. And our reality right now is that these video game environments are not just powerful stories, they're worlds that you've lived in. Earlier on in the workshop, Doug, who's now running the workshop, said a wonderful thing. I told you about how I think that comic books are a legitimate form of art because they represent one of the oldest forms of human expression, right? So do video games. This is what Doug said. He said, bears play games. The truth is, the first thing that you did as a kid, apart from cry for food, once you became, and poop, plus I have an 11-month-old, so he poops, he's good at it. But one of the first things that you do is you play. And I play with little Billy all the time. I get my hands in his roof, run around the back of the thing, and he's like, I'm chasing Daddy. He crawls on his little things and we play. And I come paint my head around and he turns around and runs in the other direction. Playing is a way that we understand our boundaries in life. It's one of the primal urges that we have. If you see animals playing, it's probably because they're trying to work out how do they move, how do they hunt, how strong are they? And you see it, as Doug said, like 2 lions, party foul, who was that? Here we go. Okay, sorry. I'm allowed to do that. They told me I was allowed to do that. I missed it. Lion accidentally bites the other one just a little bit too hard, and it stops being a game and it becomes a fight. But this is because the lions, they're testing their boundaries. They're trying to see where are they, who are they, where do I live, where do I exist in this life. And the more that they play, the more sophisticated or intelligent they become about where do I live in space, where do I fit, how do my relationships work. Like these are all things that happen, and we are naked apes. We have primal urges and things that we do that are built into our systems. We have a basic fight or flight mechanism built into our souls and our psyches and into our brains. That's what you're doing when you're playing. So is playing invalid? How many times have you heard people say, shit, just a video game? It's just a video game? We're supposed to play. We're supposed to. let's point out something that ought to be very, very evident now. What's the core group of people who are buying and playing video games now, especially console games? The core group is people over 30. That's the core group. People, they're the people with the disposable income, the money to do it, the need to relax, all of the things that you get from your entertainment of a game. The core number is the people who are over 30 to 45. So are video games for kids? Well, they can be. But they used to say that about comics, but comics are not for kids anymore. Comics are for people over the core audience is 35 and older. So I keep trying to say to people, listen, video games are built into us. We want to play games. They're just a very sophisticated way of allowing us to do what we always want to do. We want to play games. Now there's a new thing coming. The new thing that's coming is we get to play and we get to exist in a story. But the difficulty is going to be, how do we as the developers allow the players to literally play a story that we can have them make choices, but that doesn't break the story? Let me tell you a couple of the problems before I kill myself. Alright, water. And then water or something. A couple of the problems. That's right, I lost my train of thought. How do I write a movie? Well, a movie comes in a 3-act structure. First act, I want to introduce the audience to the problem. And probably 20 minutes into the movie, I want the audience to understand the hero's problem. This is what has happened to me, or this is what I need to do. My husband has been killed. I'm going to get knives and go on a mission of revenge. Comedy, The orphanage is about to close down. I saw the Three Stooges the other day. With my kid. The orphanage is going to close down. We need $870,000. Okay, that's the problem. End of Act 1. Act 2, we send our heroes on the mission, and they do all the stuff that they need to, and it's the longest part of the film. 20 minutes before the end of Act 2 is the hero's lowest moment. And it always is. This is the structure of a 3-act story. From 20 minutes to the end, they begin to solve the problem. It gets just a little bit worse, then it gets better, then they solve it, then they say, hey, we solved it, let's have a party, and then their credits roll. And that's the 3-act structure of a movie. You may or may not like that, but it's true. Go watch one. Because with very few exceptions, like an Andy Warhol experimental crazy movie, that's kind of what happens, and it's built into what we expect from watching that kind of story. But that means that the makers of the movie, the screenwriter, the director, the producers, can basically choose how to pace their story. How does that story exist? How do we bring people's emotions and move them? Well, we do it based on a 3-act structure. Now let me point this problem out to you. I want to make a video game, and I want people to follow a 3-act structure. So we're going to play the first part of it, and they get to the lowest point. In the Darkness 1 that I wrote, Jackie Estacado's girlfriend is killed, and he wants to go out on a mission of revenge. And at the very moment that he literally gets to his low point at the beginning of the film, he finds himself in war-torn World War I trenches, and he has to solve the problem, and everything turns upside down. But here's the problem in the game. Now I want Jackie Estacado, I'm the game designer, I want Jackie Estacado's player to go off and find out how to kill the bad guys and exact that revenge. And as they're going along, they find a mini game, and the mini game is popping balloons with a shotgun. And they go, this is great! And they spend 7 hours playing the mini game. That's okay. We put the mini game in there so they can think of something else to do. But the truth is, how am I supposed to pace this? I mean, when they finish popping balloons, right, then they then go, oh, poor Jenny, I need to go save her. Right? I want them to. But it's very, very difficult to think of that concept. How do we do that? Here's another one. If I want to tell you a story, then if it's a movie or a novel, I'm guiding you. You get what you are given. You read the book, you read the comic, you watch the movie or the television show, and as it unfolds, I show you what's happening. For the first time, this is a type of story where I don't just show you what's happening, I give you some tools. I allow you to turn left or right. So you come to your intersection, turn right, and you will avenge Jenny's death. Turn left, and it's a dead end full of like balloons. I mean, it could be that. And so, how am I supposed to give you the choices that I want to give you, but at the same time make you tell a story and give you the illusion of choice? So this is what we describe it as when we make games. We're not giving you choices. We are to some extent, but we are giving you the illusion that you made a choice. I'll provide you with an anecdote to help you understand how we can do this, and perhaps it will give you some food for thought. In The Darkness 1, I had a long conversation with the developer and the publisher, because I said that the premise is basically it's a hitman, and he's trying to keep the fact that he's a hitman secret from his girlfriend. She's a sweetheart. You love her. You want to do right by her, and she invites you to her new apartment, and it's your birthday, and everything's gone crazy. Your Uncle Paulie's tried to kill you. And now you go to her apartment, and she says, Jackie, come on in, come on. I baked you a cake. And you're like, man, I've got to tell her I'm a monster. So we did what's called a dialogue tree, and you may have seen this in some of the games you played. You get options. And the two options that we gave to the player was to tell her the truth or lie to her. And it gives you an interesting sense of guilt, because if you press the button that says lie to her, you feel that. You feel like, wow, maybe you feel conflicted because you're trying to protect her. Whatever the case, she says, what happened today? So if you press tell her the truth, Jackie says, I'm a mobster, and my Uncle Paulie just tried to kill me. And she says, don't be silly. If you say lie to her, in effect, you say, well, I'm working with my Uncle Paulie and something went wrong at work today. But you didn't really tell her the truth. So you feel better, you protected her, but where's this going to go? You keep going through the dialogue tree, and the truth is that while you think as a player you're making choices, it still rolls all the way down to one place. So it doesn't really matter what you answer. You think it matters because you get to choose the options of how you respond. But in the end, it just boils down to one place, and it's one button. She says, Jackie, what's wrong? Is there something you want to tell me? And you get to press the X button, and it says, tell her that you love her. And when you press the button, instead of saying, I love you, the character says, nothing. So you feel terrible. You feel guilty. We gave you the illusion that you were choosing your path through the game, but as a player, when you lie, and then you didn't even mean to lie, but you didn't even tell her that you loved her. After that, we had the players literally, and this was a big, big disagreement between myself and the developer and the publisher. Like, we believed so much in this. The publisher had a harder time, but to their credit, they bought into it in the end. What you do is you go and you sit on a sofa with Jenny and you watch To Kill a Mockingbird on TV. And every so often she says, hey Jackie, and you kind of turn around, you put your arm around her, and then you give her a kiss, and then very quietly you watch the movie. And if you do all of those things, you get an achievement. Now can you imagine being pissed off 13-year-old from Kentucky, like, why am I watching this movie for? I don't want to kiss the girl. But let me tell you what really happened. After you watch the movie with her, you get your achievement points. And so, angry kid from Kentucky says, I'm glad I got my achievement, but don't ever put me through that again. 5 minutes later in the game, she has her brains blown out right in front of your face behind a glass window. And there is nothing that you can do to stop it. And all of the shared memories that you had with her, I watched TV with that girl, she gave me a kiss, she brought me a birthday cake. You love her. And we spent 10 minutes of the player's time and any number of tens of thousands of dollars of the developer's money to build just a story. Now we disguised it as gameplay because we gave you points. We gave you an achievement. But the truth is, you got an achievement for playing the story. So, what was so great about that moment? When the game came out, all you could see on the message boards was, oh man, I'm really sad I lost my girlfriend. None of the angry kids, they weren't saying like, I'm glad she got her brains blown out. Instead, what they normally react that way. I mean, we know it. There's a lot of what we call game breakers. They want to just break it up and act crazy and be big on campus. But the truth is, they were genuinely sad that Jenny had died. Why? Because we built story into the gameplay. It was an integration of story and gameplay. Takes me back to Fatal Frame. It's an integration of story and gameplay. And you walk through the mansion, and the door opens really slowly, and you get your camera ready in case there's a ghost there. That's an integration of the gameplay, which is pressing the camera and making sure you capture the ghosts, or moving your stick forward so that you can walk into the room. And it's an integration of story, which is, I don't want to go in here. Whoa, what could there be? Is there a ghost? I'm afraid. What's my motivation? Why do bad things happen to good people? You think all of these things as you're being led into this thing. So now that I've done the Hulk, I got the opportunity. I was going to work on a game called Prototype, and then I got the opportunity to work on Darkness 1 and then Darkness 2. By the time I got to Darkness 2, I had developed a number of theories on how games should be made. Number one, no cutscenes. None. There's a way of telling the story. But what you really want, I believe, in a video game is to tell your own story. If I put you in a game, and I say, okay, go up to that area right there. You're a soldier. I want you to go up there, defuse the mines, jump over that wall, and then I want you to attack the German positions. You understand the mission, you start going, you defuse the mine, you get shot at, you jump over the wall, and then as you're running up on the German positions, everything cuts away and they show a movie of you running on the German positions and shoot the Germans. You don't want to see it in a movie. You want to go finish the job. It's your job. You're the soldier. You're the person that was supposed to do this. You don't want someone else to tell you how it was done. Good illustration, my favorite way to illustrate is how we use what we might call orientation. As in a first-person shooter, how can I make you look in a certain direction? So, let's say a premise, it's very much like a Halo type premise. The aliens have landed. Here come the aliens. And now we're going to go away to a cutscene. The cutscene shows the alien spacecraft landing. Out come the crazy aliens with their tentacles, and they start shooting laser beams and killing people. And people run away, and they say, no, the aliens are coming. Okay, that's maybe a story, but what are you doing if you're the game player while this is happening? You're sitting there with your arms folded, waiting for your chance to go shoot some alien butt. That's what you want to do. Well, let's say that I changed the way that was done, and I said, now if I orient you to look in this direction, because I can make you move down an alleyway. There are very few people, although they'll probably try to do it, if I say you have to go that way, they go, okay, great, we're going to turn. Maybe they will. But the truth is that we'll face you in this direction. Now, down comes a spaceship. Laser beams start coming out. Now comes an injured person running past you. The aliens are coming, and laser beams are flying over our heads. It's the same story. But what's the difference? The difference is that in my version, you get to play, you move through the story. You're the one that initiated combat. You're the one telling the story. Every time I take your hands away from the controller and say, I'm going to give you something, I'm guiding you. You have no illusion even of control. You have no illusion of control. And I think the new form of art and the new form of storytelling is that we must at least feel as though we're in control of the story and the choices. Now you can look at games like Fable. Peter Mullen used Fable. It's a very bold attempt to say to you, I want to give you options. You want to be a good guy or a bad guy? You want to make good decisions and be like one of those nice angel creatures? Or you want to be a demon? You want to be a bad guy? It's kind of cool. I mean, it's nice. But I think, in my opinion, it did not really get you to the end where you said, oh, well, I feel as though I made choices that really determined the past of my character. In a sense, I feel you made choices so that really determined what the stats of my character were. I had these many bad deeds and this many good deeds. Not as effective. But we can go back to one of the earliest version of a game called Deus Ex. Again, okay, try this one. Who played Deus Ex? The first version, I should say. Okay, so some people played it. What Deus Ex did, it was one of the first games to really commit to doing this. It allowed you to make choices about how you took on each individual level. So, you come to a problem, and the problem is that you've got a robot, and the robot's on the other side of the room, and you know the only way to get this robot out of action is to turn him off at the computer console on just behind him. And what Deus Ex was so good at was it would give you 3 or 4 ways to do that. You could sneak. You could go right underneath the robot. You could move around. You could be silent. You could wait for the robot to walk over your head. You could pop your head out, go to the back, turn off the robot. You could run out with guns blazing and shoot it and get killed like 7 times in a row like I did. You can find all of the computer consoles that are dotted around. You can solve all of the puzzles. And when you finish solving all of the puzzles, that will lead you to the computer, and when you get to the computer, you can turn off the robot. You can whistle. It never worked for me, but it was genius for this reason. It was genius because it gave you the option to do different things in gameplay that allowed you to solve a problem. And when it gave you those different options, by doing so, it also gave you different stories. That is my belief. Your story for sneaking is not the same as your story for shooting. And your story for solving puzzles is not the same as sneaking. You use your brain here, you use your stealth and your guile here, you use your strength here. This is what video games can provide the audience that no other form of entertainment in many ways can do. We can give you the option to be strong, stealthy, quiet, intelligent. And if games are designed right, you can do that from beginning to end. Here's another thing that you can do. You can press pause. You can come back to the game about 3 days later. See how you want to do it. You can't do that with a movie. But every form of entertainment changes depending on its environment. If I give you a novel and a nice fire, and it's a cold night, and you sit, make yourself a cup of coffee, sit there, read your novel, and it feels like something. You can turn the pages yourself. You can control the novel, and you can stop whenever you want to. If I give you an audio book, it feels completely different. The environment is probably different. I doubt so much that you will put your audiobook on by the fire and try to do the same thing. You might do it in the car. If I give you Superman the movie, you go to the movie theater and you watch it, and this is the rule. You sit down, you get your big thing of popcorn, your big thing of Coke, and this is how you watch it, but it never stops. They're not putting it on pause for you. I give you that same movie, you take it home, and at a certain point you say, I'm going to make a sandwich. Pause, go off, make a sandwich, come back, eat your sandwich. Like, you control the rules of how, and the rules change with how you experience it. We're at that point now with console games, PC games, and especially casual games. Look at what you're playing on, and look at how you're playing them. Think about this. I design games holistically. I want to know what the players are doing. I can pretty much guess what the players are doing on a console game. They are sitting down, twiddling their thumbs, and they might have a headset on talking to some guy in Kentucky who's being mean to them. Probably that same 13-year-old that was mean to me. And it kind of changes. You've got a mouse. You might have something else running on your PC screen. Any number of things. Now I want to know what's happening with pads. What's happening with an iPad? How do people use them? Do they hold it in the left hand? Do they manipulate it with one hand? Do they put it on a stand in front of them and play with 2 hands? Do they do all of those things? What about the new functions of a pad? Right now, craziest thing, we're about to design a game for a Christian-based company in Georgia. I live in the South, right? So just about every company is a Christian-based company. And they came to us and they said, we'd like to do some stories of the Bible And the first thing I said to them was, you know, and there's a reason they want to do it so they can teach people the stories of the Bible. And I said, okay, you've come to the right place at the wrong guy. I mean, I'm not really a church-going guy, and I was raised, you know, Anglican Church of England for about 7 years, and then I ran, you know, because I'm not that guy. But I'll tell you what's important is, what about the story? If you tell those stories correctly, the story of Joshua, the story of Genesis, if you tell the stories in a really cool way, you'll teach people about the Bible. That's, you've got to do the story first. So one of the things that we're looking at is doing an iPad game about Joshua and Jericho. And this is how it works. You march around the city of Jericho as Joshua. And every so often, in the Bible story, they shout, "Hallelujah!" And down come the walls of Jericho. I thought, man, that's really good gameplay. How about if we send sound waves, kind of like a ballista game, like a cannonball, heading towards the walls of Jericho. And if you get your tone, your vocal tone to be resonant enough, if you get it wrong, it goes, ooh, falls short. If it goes too high, ooh, goes over the walls and the guards go, if you get it right, boom, and it hits the wall. So you're destroying the walls of Jericho with sound, which is the specific context of that Bible story. Wait a minute, this is a great idea. Why don't we use sound to play video games? How about if we use iPads which have an audio function, and if we click or clap, I mean, we're not going to look crazy on the train going home. Hallelujah! But it might be cool. It might be cool to do any of those things. It might be cool and innovative to use sound to try to tap into music. Look, what is Guitar Hero? Is it sound? Not really. It's just tapping. But it's working with sound. It's coordinating with beats and times. So I think that we're about to create innovative ways of using and even working with video games. We talk about video goggles, right? Google just came out with a set of goggles that literally will put you in, you can geotag yourself. You can see virtual reality, or what's the other, not virtual reality, augmented reality. Now, what I do with my iPhone, I can at least do this right now, it has augmented reality, and I can turn my phone, and then I can see, oh, over there, there's a restaurant, someone tagged it. And you can literally see the icon on your phone. If you pull the phone down, you can't see it anymore. How about treasure hunt, using those ideas? What if you made a treasure hunt that no one had ever really tried to do before, and you promoted it really well? And you put the whole world going and find like a golden coin or something, or a Ferrari, whatever it is that people want. And you build that with augmented reality. You get your phone, and you look up and you're like, where is this thing? You look up above a building and suddenly there's a twirling spaceship that you couldn't see with your naked eye. What kind of game is this? Could you shoot it down in your game? We're changing the way that we're making video games, and I don't think that the industry itself is aware of how much we're changing it. We're going to do augmented reality games. We're going to do games with sound. We're going to use the tools that people use as tools at home. Do you use your iPad to record sound? Sure you do. You use your iPad in any number of apps because you want to do the memo function. Do you have voice recognition software that you can use on your iPad? Sure, you can type an entire screenplay just by talking to it. Well, how about if we take all of those things and we start using them to make games? But what you have to realize is the sky is now the limit. We're not limited now, and the new consoles are coming, the computer chips are changing, voice recognition is changing. You know where voice recognition really needs to change? It's in my frickin' car, because that car is trying to kill me. This is what she does, by the way. I call her Daphne, because she's like my nemesis. I have a dial function, and I have a British accent, and I live in America. And I don't think that the American voice recognition likes my British accent very much. So I'll say, dial Chris Marino, a good friend of mine who's an artist, and it will dial like the only enemy that I have in the world, like the most evil human being who I kept in mind. It'll go, no, stop, right? So I press stop. dial Chris Marino. Now it dials the second most evil person. Like she'll say, when you come to this intersection, she'll say, turn right. I go, okay, fine, I turn right. And she says, now do a U-turn. I'm like, wait a minute, you meant turn left. But once they perfect it, and hopefully they don't perfect it with Daphne, because that would be a completely new game. Once they perfect it, this voice recognition software is going to change what you do. Right now, you talk to people on Modern Warfare. Usually you talk to some really angry, annoyed person that says, you suck and he's broken, right? But the truth is, you talk. We're so becoming used to the idea that we talk, that we're going to start talking even more. My wife thought it was really funny. My nephew came to visit from Great Britain, and she said, like, you guys are just the worst couple of geeks, because he really wanted me to play Modern Warfare, and so we played Modern Warfare together. She said she walks in, and there's the two of us, and we can barely see her, and we're both kind of yelling, go left, Cobra, come on. She's like, what is wrong with you? What happened to you? You're in your 40s, you'll grow up. So I've never grown up. If I grew up, I'd not be able to make video games. We are talking. We're thinking differently. We're constantly thinking differently. Go back to the point I told you. You had a chance to think about it now? Do you remember the video game environment that you grew up with? Do you remember the place that you went to? There was this amazing place. I bet you got one or two. Recently, I was asked to come down to Savannah College of Art and Design to lecture to them on video game creation, but it was to do with the promotion and advertising and marketing school that they have down there. And this is what I told them. I think that a new world is opening up even for advertisers. How come, what if you had product that was placed inside a video game that you could interact with? Just think about this if you're an advertiser. You create compelling gameplay and a logical story, but you are Coca-Cola. So the gameplay is that you come into this environment, and it might be, say, New York. It has to be something that fits. And you walk in and there's Coke bottles, and your job is to get the Coke bottles and save them, or drink them, or shoot them. And it's Coke, Coke, Coke. This is product placement. It's not just product placement. Product placement is when you watch a movie and somebody drinks Coke. But product integration is completely different. Think of a James Bond movie. You can go back to James Bond. James Bond gets out the door, and Q says to him, Bond, this is the Aston Martin Vanquish. And it goes from 0 to 60 in 70 miles, you know. It's a big ad for Aston Martin. It's not the best car in the world. You ever driven an Aston Martin? You go straight, you try to turn, it goes straight, you're drunk. You know? Trust me. So product integration. So did you know how many people wanted an Aston Martin after that first Bond film? Do you know how many people wanted a BMW because it was here and there? You know, this product placement integration is everything. Now look at the product integration that's coming in video games. We can literally have you play with Cokes for half an hour. Coca-Cola, wait a minute, what's the audience for this? Is Modern Warfare? The audience, wow, we can't even reach that many people. And they're not just, they're playing with our product. Our product is a part of the story. It opens up a whole new world of advertising. Everything that we're doing right now is completely different. Now, I'm going to do something, by the way. If any of you have a burning question, I'm happy to take them if you'd like me to go on to this topic. And, you know, every time you do this, as a guest speaker, you say, is anybody ever? And they're like, get out. Okay. Think of a question for as we wind down, because I definitely want to answer any questions as best as I can. So, one of the things that I hope that you guys will be interested in a little bit, I may ask for one more show of hands, and if you'll indulge me. The show of hands I want is, how many of you are interested in maybe doing video games or working in the video game industry? Okay. So enough of you. One of the things I definitely want to do is to tell you just a little bit about like what you can expect. The first word of advice that any of us who work in the industry have for you is run away, run in the other direction, don't do it. No, it's a great industry, but what I want to encourage you guys to understand is just because maybe you're an artist, that doesn't mean to say that you're going to do character design in the world of video games. There are plenty of avenues to work in a video game. Let me give you I'll do the structure of the way a game is created, just so that those of you who don't want to work in a video game kind of understand how it is that we put a video game together. First thing, video game development cycle, probably 3 years, maybe more. Darkness 2 was 4 years. And the development cycle, like how long it takes to make the game, it's like 1.5 years to actually make the pieces, and then 1.5 years of polishing. It's like you found a really good diamond, and then the next part is just keep it polishing, man. We're still making. You've got programmers. I don't understand programmers. Programmers are weird. They speak in a different language. They act differently. I work with them from time to time. I'll never understand them. But I admire them, and they're the grease that makes the engine work. Without programmers, we can't make games. I'm the guy that provides programmers with really, really difficult things to do. Hey, can we make this thing bounce? Maybe. Do me a favor. All right, how about if I give you a chocolate bar? Can you make this thing bounce? I don't think so. All right, how about if I give you money? I can make it bounce. Then you can make it bounce. Yeah, but I don't think you've got artists, but artists have any number of jobs. It's really cool. I mean, you can be a concept artist, you can be a character designer, you can be a renderer. You can work with the models, so you build a character for a video game. You know, little grunts in Halo, or one of the soldiers, and you have to build that character. You can build it, and you're going to have to try to animate it. We'll get to animators in a second. But you have to dress it. You have to make it look right. What about the environment? You go in a city, it looks like New York, right? Not all of, go to New York or Mexico City, walk outside. See how many bricks are actually the same kind of brick. Not really. There's gray, there's blue, there's white, there's red, there's graffiti, there's broken bricks, there's old bricks, there's scorched bricks, stuff that was set on fire. I'm describing Mexico City, right? A lot of stuff set on fire, I guess, I don't know. There's everything is different, right? And so that's what you have to do as an artist. It's not simple when you get to, but you can do concept art, you can create characters. I was mentioning earlier that my producer on Darkness 2 called me up, and really my job was the single player game, but he asked me for a favor. Because the multiplayer game was kind of well underway, but they really couldn't quite nail down the characters for multiplayer. So my job was to basically tell them, okay, these are the characters. So I told them the characters, and then they designed them. They did a couple of iterations, and then they finished them. So a writer creates them, an artist kind of draws them, the producer looks at them and says yes, no, maybe, and then they get approved. It's a collaborative process. Animators. This is, to me, the genius. The animators really are programmers, and they work very closely with programmers. And what they do is they animate the basic skeleton of the characters, things that move. Animation might be just a box falling from a fire escape. It might be, something else. Okay. But animators are supposed to work with the framework of, say, a character. What happens if you build a character and you've got a skeleton, and you build the outside, and then the skeleton bends down and picks something up, and the outside doesn't move in the same space? I mean, you have to program all of this to work together. Then the artists come in and render the characters so that you can see them in close-up. You've got one into the party found. I've only got a bottle left, so if that goes up again, there'll be another bottle again. You've got writers. I mean, obviously I do a lot of writing in games. You may write the big story. I start with a blank piece of paper. Sometimes I'm writing a scene, and the developer calls me up and says, guess what? Good news and bad news. All right, I'll take the good news. The good news is that we just developed a new way of this character working. You can fly now. Up until today, we couldn't work out how to make you fly, and now you can fly. You want to know the bad news? Now you've got to rewrite the entire game because you can fly. Now, you can look at this one of two ways. I look at it the positive way. I'm supposed to. I know it. I understand games. The negative way would be, oh, no, I can't believe you broke my story. I'll never be able to fix this. The positive way is, yeah, that's how games work. Technology. In what industry, perhaps the film industry from time to time, in which industry does the technology change every day? So because of new technology, you have to write and create differently. Some of that new technology makes things an awful lot easier. How to render characters, how to make them move. Some of that technology creates massive problems. Well, we can do this now, but guess what? We have to redesign everything else. Should we? Like, technology is a blessing and curse. It always is, right? Just ask the French when the British came up with a longbow. That's right. No, the French did, sorry. So, and then you have the producers and the designers. Within the framework of the team, you have people who are basically level designers. They go from the beginning and they design out a level and they basically make the level kind of work. Then it's level 2, then level 3. How do we do level?
We should start soon with questions.
Okay, we'll start with questions in just a minute. The level designers basically design out a level and they're answerable to their level. What happens then? How do the AI work in the artificial intelligences? How do you program artificial intelligence? What happens if you shoot an artificial intelligence and the programming says that as it falls, it keeps falling and goes under the ground? I was explaining earlier on, just technically, we call this a float. How does the animation let the person die? Go look at a video game in which there's a lot of death or whatever, and take a look at the 10 or 12 different ways in which the characters float when they're killed. They're shot from behind, they fall this way. They're shot in the head, they fall that way. Like we have to take care of every single one of those. And it's not just like animating a movie. I mean, we can animate that in a movie if we want to. We have to animate it because of what the player did at the time that he did it, or she did it. I shot you behind when you were running away from me, you have to float differently. We have to program AI behavior. So that the designers are in charge of making sure the level is a complete unit from the beginning to the end, and the lead designer is in charge of all of those levels. And then the producer is the person that makes sure it can be paid for, that deals with the office politics, that deals with an angry programmer that just embedded code in that basically gives you a link to a porn site. I mean, this stuff has happened. Listen, I'm scared of programmers, right? I'm scared of them because they can do stuff. They can wipe out my bank account. I don't know how this is done, but they can do it. So that's just an overview of what it is that we do. But I mean, to encapsulate it, it's this. We engineer people's emotions. That's what we're doing. I'm taking your emotions and I'm making you feel something. Angry, sad, frustrated. I want you to feel frustrated. If you can't get past this level the first time, you're frustrated. And I need you to feel frustrated, because when you get past that level the 7th time, you go, yeah, I did it. And I want you to feel that too, but you're never going to do it if everything is really, really simple. We're building your emotions, and the way forward is just this open door of a million. We say we want to give choices to the players, but we have choices in video game creation that you would not believe right now. We can go this way, this way, this way, this way, there, and every single one of them is another branch in common. All right, so I've been told that this is the time in which you guys get to put your hand up and actually ask a question. Now we're going to see if anybody's going to do it. Oh, we have a question, and I'm going to give you. Hey. All right, when you finish it, by the way, don't make like barking noises.
Okay, my name is Humberto Cervera. I'm a game designer, and I have 2 quick questions. There's a real interesting debate right now in the blogosphere of game development, where I think it was started by Ralph Koster in his blog, where he said narrative is not a game mechanic, but there's the other side of the debate that's mainly the game journalists like Leigh Alexander or folks at IGN that say that narrative is what taking games into a new level. That with narrative is what's making games mature as a medium. While people like David Scott Jay or Ralph Koster argued that games do not need narrative, and narrative is not actually a game mechanic or something that is needed within games. So the 2 questions would be, what would be your stance on this discussion, and why do you think game journalists think that narrative is taking?
To answer the first part of the question, as you probably can guess, I really, really strongly believe that narrative is a vital component, not just for some games, but in some small part, it's almost for everything. Remember what I started with? As a writer, we say story is everything. In games, I believe everything is story. Everything you do, everything you press. Now, narrative and story, well, I mean, can you separate the two of them? Perhaps you might say that a narrative is, the unfolding of a story with characterization, whereas a story is just an idea or a concept. Not all games need narrative. I mean, our example earlier is Pac-Man. Pac-Man. I mean, get ghosts, right? Does that really need a background? You need to know what made Pac-Man come to this place and eat ghosts? No. I think, in fact, if you did that and you provided story, backstory of Pac-Man, you'd probably kill it. It'd probably be really bad for it. I still believe that, and this was a good example perhaps that we brought up, that Pac-Man is story. You may think, well, how could Pac-Man be story? I'll give you an example. You're chopping pieces. I don't even know what they are, I think they're just dots. And as you get close, you get to the bit that allows you to eat the ghosts. And they're coming the other way. And you get it just before they get there. Now they turn tail and run, and you go and you chew them. That's story. Because what it is really is, oh no, my time is running out. Oh, hey, I got it. Now I'm going to go turn the tables on you. Oh no, we're at a race. All those things are actually part of that story, even though it's just implied, or it's just a function of the way the game changes. As I said, David Jaffe, who's a good friend and someone I respect immensely, just a really great game creator and developer who has made a couple of really, really brilliant franchises live for a long time. Dave is of the same school. I don't think there is any narrative in the game. To which I responded with my anecdote about Jackie and Jenkins and how you're basically playing a game by pressing buttons and making dialogue choices until you arrive at a point where you have to say, I press this button to tell you I love you. I press this button to go shoot someone. I press this button to run out. Narrative is everywhere. Why do journalists believe in narrative? I wouldn't say that all game developers don't believe in it. I mean, there are plenty of game developers and people who work in the industry, like myself, Amy Hennig and Naughty Dog. These are people who have an accomplishment and really, really believe that narrative exists in games. Doesn't have to exist prominently in every game. Why do the journalists side with narrative? Well, I think it's in part because they're always writing about the story. I mean, it serves the journalists. This is the story. This is the story of the princess. This is Kingdoms of Ibero. This is what happened. They write about story because it's one of the categories that they're interested in. So they believe that storytelling is a part of it. It's something that they've been trained to do. Okay, another question? Yes.
Well, in every form of narrative, like movement, moment, orientation, there's transitions. So you have to learn to use it to keep the interest of your audience. How do you achieve that? What's the equivalent of transitions in the movies?
Okay, good question. What we see in movies is a dissolve or a cut or a wipe. It's in terms of editing, making a film. It's like an in and an out point. It's an editing point. If I am filming from your perspective and I turn this way and I cut, what we want to do is to have me start from here and bring the camera over shoulder and walk with me. That's like a natural editing point. It's also in and out point. It's like this. Okay, that's right. Enter.
Here, I'll change it.
I don't know if that was bad or good, but it's fine. So we use these dissolves and transition. We transition with character, we transition with moments to emotion, we transition with cinematic techniques. How do we transition in games? We talked about this a little bit earlier. Our camera does not move very well. When we talk about camera in video games, we're not just talking about camera angles, we're talking about how people recognize where they stand in space. My wife is great because she has absolutely zero spatial awareness. She's so brilliant. And I said, look, sweetheart, you always want me to watch these like crappy TV shows with you. And I don't want to watch The Bachelor. But I'll watch The Bachelor if you play 10 minutes of Grand Theft Auto with me. So she played. She cannot understand the spatial relationship between turning left and having the character go left. So when we played Grand Theft Auto, within 3 minutes, she had punched an old lady in the street. Now the police were coming. I said, well, press the triangle, jack that car. She finally gets in the car, tries to turn left, turns right, smashes into a wall, the police arrest her. She finished. The fact is that for some people, like some people don't like 3D, some people don't like video game transitions because they can't understand like where they go. But we use two things to transition. I think one of them we use is we stay behind, like we'll go in and out with camera. We could be first person, and if we have to drive in a car, we'll come out of the car. Or maybe we'll stay in first person. But we use that kind of cinematic trend. Frankly, it's not really a transition. Because we are just still staying, our relationship to the player is still in a similar kind of place. If you want to transition emotionally, we may end a scene with something going black or fade to black or whatever. Then we do the bane of my existence. Freaking load screens. I hate them. I hate them, I hate them, I hate them. One of the things that we did in the darkness was preload a little movie that played when we were doing the load screens. Think about it. If we preloaded a movie, then when the transition's happening, which is the transition where it has to load all of the assets of the next level, you got to see Jackie Estacado just go sitting down going, I used to come here with my Uncle Frank. And that was cool. That's what I'm looking for. Like, how do transitions work? The answer is they do not work. Not yet. Transitions emotionally, they're not really working, but we're working on it. It's a constant thing that we go at.
As a foreigner storyteller in the USA, how hard is to find a job in the video game industry?
Yeah. And can I help you guys find one, right? Do I know any people? It's different for different people, right? I mean, everyone says you cannot break into the comic book industry. It is true. It's like hard to break into. You want to know how I broke into the comic book industry as a writer? I did the only thing that you cannot do. I went to San Diego, and in the middle of the comic convention, and I approached an editor, and he was looking for a new writer for Hellblazer, which is really prestigious. And there were apparently like 20 or 25 known writers trying out for this book. And I said, can I write Hellblazer? And he said, what have you written? I said, I've never written anything in my life. And he gave me the job. I mean, I wrote a script, he read it, said, you write for Hellblazer. How? I don't know. How did I do it? I met, if your mom knows Terry Jones, that's 18. If you're on the other hand, your mom does not know Terry Jones or any of the ones five people, the answer is, I have no idea, I have some ideas. Networking. This was always my big thing. If you know the people, if you can see them, if you can show people in the game industry that you understand what they're doing, if you can make yourself available. If hiring you is easy, you'll be hired. Price-wise, how can I hire you if it's good for price, but I can't get you to live in the States because it's really hard for you to get a green card at that time? If you become a difficulty, I can't hire you. I certainly encourage anybody to want to do this, right? I also encourage people to want to, network, teach them what you can do. I constantly say to people that want to break into comics as an artist, you may be a good artist, but every single one of my friends that I really, really respect as an artist always carries a sketchbook. And they're always sketching this, that, and the other. They work constantly. I work constantly. I go to bed at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I wake up at 9, and I do it all over again. I deal with editors, I do the business, and then I go, get a little time for myself and my family, and then I sit down in my office and I type again and again and again and again. It's hard work, but I feel like I'm preaching to you, and you're 7. I'm saying, hey, little buddy, if you work hard and stay in school. Stay in school, kids. I don't know. No, there's no answer for it, right? There is none. It's unfortunate that I cannot say this is how I think you should do it. Except I can give you some basic ideas of things that I think you should do, which is play games and learn games and continue to understand game creation. innovate in your thoughts about how you could bring something to the game industry, then tell the people in the game industry what it is that you bring in. Keep learning, keep learning, keep learning about games. If you want games to be made that you're a part of, if you believe that you're bringing something to it, you probably aren't. And if you are bringing something to it, someone's going to recognize that. How did I break in? Yeah, it wasn't just because my mom knows Terry Jones. It was also because I spent years building my career in comics. Because I worked late at night. How did I become a freelance writer in comics apart from my crazy story of going to San Diego? Well, I used to be Alan Moore's editor. I used to be Neil Gaiman's editor. And when I would get scripts to From Hell and Big Numbers from Alan, and they were only typed and they were these massive pieces of paper, I would read them, and then I would go home after my crazy job in publishing, and I'd sit down and I would write scripts. I tried to learn how to do them. Are you prepared to do that? Because everyone says, like, oh, I talk to people and I say, hey, you writing a screenplay? Yeah, I'm writing a screenplay. How long have you been on the screenplay? Well, I'm in my 18th month. Last screenplay I wrote, called Wedding Shower, got picked up, took me 5 days. And I don't even type very quickly. I just look at the thing and my hunt and peck and get an headache. But it's you have to one. Oh, it's coming. I hate this answer. I've always been asked this. How can I break in comics? How can I break in games, film? I hate my answer. It's you can't. Now go prove me wrong. You can. Go prove me right. It is. Are you dedicated enough? And will you find the confidence that you're bringing something to that game industry? How specifically can you break in? I don't know, learn programming, learn writing. Try to find scripts. Review games. Get into the industry as a reviewer, working in the outside in. Some people write because they were editors first. I do not know. It's the hardest one to answer. Any more?
No, I think we're going to end now.
All right. Okay, so we are done. Thank you so much.
Hay una fiesta de clausura en la que el juego nos va a acompañar. Ahí si quieren echar una chela. Los boletos los tenemos afuera, son 200 pesos y es en la Roma. Y también les recordamos que ahorita hay una conferencia con Ubisoft. Viene el brand manager desde San Francisco, también va a estar buenísima, entonces espero se quede. And thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much.